What's up, everybody? Trinity here, and welcome back to the Second Street Marvel. In today's comic book review, I'm going to be doing, once again, another double feature today, talking about Annihilation Scourge Fantastic Four, issue number 1, and Annihilation Scourge Nova, issue number 1. Now, both of these books are just one-shot titles that are being tied into the Annihilation Scourge little mini event that's going on in Marvel Comics right now. And so far we have only gotten one, and that was Annihilation Scourge Alpha, the first, I guess, basically introduction and setup to this story, where we found that there was an attack from the Cancerverse on the negative zone, and Annihilus ended up escaping with the help of Blastar, one of his former enemies. They had teamed up and weren't able to fight against this annihilation, this scourge from the Cancerverse, and so he escaped to. He escaped to the, I guess you could say, the positive zone, or basically like the regular Marvel universe, if you will, for this story, and made contact with Nova. And that's pretty much what we get here in these two issues. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about here is Fantastic Four Annihilation Scourge. This book is being written by Christos Gage. The penciler is Diego Olortegui. The inker is Juan Velasco with Cam Smith and Scott Hanna. The colorist is Eric Arciniega, and the letterer is VC's Travis Lanham. The cover artist is Jose Maria Casanovas. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that title page there, because I know I definitely butchered no less than one of those names right there. Hey, we're not all the best with names, hey, and I'm willing to admit that. And go ahead and take a look at that cover there as well, if you'd like. Take a look at that right there. Okay, so in this book, we pretty much learned about, like I said, I'm not very familiar with Annihilus, or any of the, like the Annihilation events or anything that has happened in the past, or the Negative Zone, or the Cancerverse, or anything like that. I'm not very familiar with that, so that's something that I can definitely speak, I guess, from experience or inexperience from when it comes to these stories. Because in this book, we learn, it's a Fantastic Four book. We see where we get a little bit of backstory, a little bit of narration, if you will, from I'm sorry, I forget his name. Here from the Human Torch. Johnny here. He's sitting here talking about his time in the Negative Zone before, when he was trapped there, and had basically been fighting against, I believe it was the Cancerverse here, and he ended up saving them and kind of becoming the king of the leader of their people, and how he ended up kind of like abandoning them. And so, we learn a little bit about that from Johnny Storm here, as we see that the Fantastic Four have been contacted to go to the Negative Zone to go and help them, and that's what we see here, where some of the people there had reached out to them to get the Fantastic Four to go there and help them. And so we see all the Fantastic Four end up going to the Negative Zone to help these people from this attack, from the Annihilation Scourge, if you will, from the Cancerverse. And part of the reason they end up taking off, and they end up leaving, the two younger of the kids, and again, I'm not very familiar with them, but that is Franklin and Valeria, end up staying behind as the rest of the family go to the Cancerverse to end up fighting against the Cancerverse there in the Negative Zone. And Franklin Richards, we find, ends up being, feeling responsible for this, just for some things that he had done in the past. And of course, Johnny Storm feels very responsible for basically ditching out and leaving these people kind of in the dust, and just leaving them behind and kind of forgetting about him after they had really pretty much crowned him king. And apparently we learn here also that they had voted him out by basically voting Annihilus in as their leader as well. And we also see the reason that Franklin Richards actually feels responsible is because of who is leading this Annihilation Scourge, if you will, from the Cancerverse, and that is Sentry. And what we find is that Sentry here is actually not even from the Cancerverse. This isn't a Negative Zone version of him or anything. It's actually one that he had actually sent there. Apparently some events that had happened recently, and they do make mention of that in this book. And that's largely what we get here, is the Fantastic Four getting there into the Cancerverse and fighting fighting the Cancerverse version of themselves in the negative zone. I'm sorry, in the negative zone, they're fighting this Cancerverse version of themselves, and that's largely what we get here in this book. Is just, you know, the Fantastic Four fighting against themselves, and we can see that they do. You know, I'm gonna leave it open a little bit for you guys here, but they do get there, and you know, find some victories and some allies along the way to help them defeat the Cancerverse version of themselves. Again, guys, I don't know a whole lot about this series or anything that has happened before this, but I feel that this book does enough to kind of fill us in on what exactly this is going on in this story. Again, I thought this book was written pretty good. Like I said, it fills us in on everything. The art in this book, I actually like the art in this book. There's some things that I don't necessarily like in here as well. Like we see some of these pictures here, like of Reed. I'm sorry, I was calling him Franklin earlier, wasn't I? But of Reed Richards and Sue and Sue as they're sitting here talking. In some of these panels, like Sue just seems to look a little too young. I don't know. She just like some of the art here, like it's not like totally consistent throughout. Sometimes it looks a little too cartoony. Sometimes it looks like just about like perfect. Like this picture that I showed you guys here just a few minutes ago. I mean, this is just like, it's really nice, but at times, like, I don't know, just I'm not sure how much I like the art in this book. The coloring is actually really well though, but again, I think that's sometimes kind of irrelevant as long as you're liking the story. Again, I thought this was a pretty good book in filling us in on some more of the information that I don't know about because I never read any of the previous series. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about here is Annihilation Scourge Nova. Issue number 1, and these are all a series of one-shot books that are coming out and to tie in to this little event. And I believe there's going to be what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books in total. So that's really not too bad for this event that we're getting here now. Nova here. The writer is Matthew Rosenberg. The artist is Ibrahim Robertson. The colorist is Carlos Lopez, and it's lettered by VC's Corey Petit, with the cover artist as Jose Maria Casanovas. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that just in case I butchered any of those names of those people who worked very hard on this book. And I will once again show you guys that cover as well. Again, this is written by Matthew Rosenberg. I'm just a fan of Matthew Rosenberg. I like his work. I like how he writes, and you know, it's no different in this book. I thought this book did a pretty good job once again of filling us in of Richard Ryder and just kind of his past and dealing with the negative zone and the Cancerverse here as well, as he has obviously done that in the past. And he is the person that was actually personally reached out to by Annihilus in this particular book that we've seen at the very end of Annihilation Scourge Alpha. And so, like I said, it gives us just some nice background story, a little bit of exactly what he's gone through, his battle with, you know, just overcoming like the Cancerverse and things before, where he had, you know, in the negative zone, just some of the things that he's been through and kind of where he's at in his life right now. We see that when we found him in the Annihilation Scourge Alpha, he was there. Basically drinking. He's an alcoholic at this point, you know, kind of drinking his sorrows away. And that's when Annihilus ends up going to reach out to him to come and help them fight against this scourge here from the Cancerverse. And we see that he's they actually get invaded there, and this is in the positive zone, or the regular world, if you will, where they are making this attack. And so he hops right into it, right into action, and teams up with Annihilus here to fight back against the Scourge, as they're there kind of talking about exactly what's going on and why Annihilus was reaching out to him, exactly because obviously these guys have been at odds before here is what we can see. And largely we're getting a lot of that, you know, kind of background information as we learn about Richard Ryder and what he's gone through with all of this stuff in the past, as they are there fighting against the Scourge that has now tracked them down and followed Annihilus here, basically from the negative zone. And that's what we get. You know, we get a bunch of cool stuff in here, a bunch of cool little scenes and everything. Now, I've got to say, I don't necessarily like all of the art in this book. I didn't like the way Annihilus was drawn in here as compared to what he was in the Annihilation Scourge Alpha. It just didn't look as good. And we see that he actually gets confronted here by Sentry as well in this book. And that's kind of what this is largely all doing, as we can see here that he does end up getting in a fight with all these characters from the Cancerverse and almost gets overtaken by them, but he does narrowly escape. So again, we're getting more good information here. Kind of mostly, it seems like all of these one-shot issues are just giving us background information that's going to tie into what I believe will be the Annihilation Scourge Omega, that will be the last book of these, released on December 18th. I believe. So we had the first issue that released 2 weeks ago. We've got Fantastic Four and now Nova that are being released this week. Next week we get 2 more issues here in what is it, Silver Surfer and what is it, Beta Ray Bill, before we end up getting the Annihilation Scourge Alpha in 2 more weeks. Again, guys, I think, you know, for not knowing about the story, I think the stories are doing good, filling you in on all of that background information that we need to finish this story in the Annihilation Scourge Omega event. And, you know, I gotta say, it's not too bad. You know, again, I've never read any of these books before, and I think that they're doing a pretty good job in explaining all that for somebody out there, like I said, for somebody like me who hasn't read any of these books before. But let me know down in the comments below. Have you been reading the Annihilation Scourge event? Have you been keeping up with all these different books? If not, does it sound like something that you might be into? I know there are some people out there who don't want to go out there and buy each individual floppy. I'm sure some people will end up waiting for a trade paperback or a collected edition of this series. And again, hey, you know, no fault in that, because, you know, sometimes you might want to save a couple of dollars when it comes to an event like this, considering the trade paperback will probably come out in, you know, maybe February. So yeah, I don't know. Again, I thought this series so far has been pretty decent altogether. Now, like I said, the art and the consistency in the art in some of these books, I'm not 100% on board with, but I am kind of liking the story going on here. But like I said, let's talk about that down in the comments below. That's all I have for this video today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Second Street Marvel. If you're not already, please make sure you're subscribed, click the little bell and all of that good stuff. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. It's all good. I don't take it personal. But while you're at it, make sure that you share it with a friend and invite them to come hang out with us here on the Second Street Marvel. You all have a very good day. Have a great rest of your week. Happy reading. Let's talk about some comic books, and we'll see you in the next video. Later.